Reading to you from Deuteronomy chapter 8. For the Lord is about to bring you into a goodly land, a land of brooks of water, springs and deeps coming out in valley and in mountain, a land of wheat and barley and vines and figs and pomegranates, a land of oil, olives and honey, a land where not penury will you eat bread, you will lack nothing in it, a land whose stones are iron, from whose mountains you will hew copper. And you will eat and be sated and bless the Lord your God on the goodly land that he has given you. Watch yourself, lest you forget the Lord your God and not keep his commandments and his laws and his statutes that I charge you today. Lest you eat and be sated and build goodly houses and dwell in them, and your cattle and sheep multiply, silver and gold multiply for you, and all you have multiply, and your heart become haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who brings you out of the land of Egypt and from the house of slaves, who leads you through the great and terrible wilderness, viper, serpent, and scorpions, and thirst where there is no water, who brings water out for you from flintstone, who feeds you manna in the wilderness, which your fathers did not know, in order to afflict you and in order to try you, to make it go well for you in your later time. And you will say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand made me this wealth. And you will remember the Lord your God, for he it is who gives you power to make wealth in order to fulfill his covenant that he swore to your fathers on this day. And from the Gospel of Mark chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, the country of the Gerasenes. And when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain, for he had often been restrained with shackles and chains. But the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs along the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." We had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding. And the unclean spirits begged him, and send us into the swine, and let us enter them. So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea, and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it, and then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. This is the word of the Lord. Mark is a dark gospel, and where Jesus engages with the enemy to defeat the enemy. The other Gospels, they're not nearly as dark, and like for instance John, you never even hear anything about demons, but they're actually all telling the same story, in which evil is being defeated, and in which Jesus reigns as Lord. So here we are in Gentile territory. There are a lot of Gentile in Galilee of the Gentiles, but there aren't any Jews over here Decapolis. And it's all Gentile territory, and there are pig farmers there. And so this is all a good clue for who's Mark's audience. He wants the Gentiles. They're Gentiles in his congregation. They're worshiping the Jewish Messiah, the Christ, and they are indeed part of this story. So when Jesus arrives, it says that he's met a man who has been pushed out of his community, and probably certainly because they feared him and this demoniac, and they've tried to bind him and to break his chains, and he was very frightening to them. They couldn't control him. He was just so strong, and they pushed him out to live among the tombs. And these tombs, they're found all over the world. These megalithic tombs, which are stones around which the ancients, they buried their dead there, but they also brought food offerings there to appease the dead and to summon the spirits of blessing and protection. And there are many tens of thousands of these stones in the Golan Heights and east of the Sea of Galilee and along the Jordan River. The description is not subtle. This man belongs to the dead. He's dead. In Mark's Gospel, the demons always know who Jesus is, which is interesting because no one knows who Jesus is. They're all asking, very curious, who is Jesus? But the demons, they know who Jesus is, and they're at war with Jesus. This is a battle that Jesus is fighting, and they persecute and oppress people. And to us, this is all very strange, our Western way of thinking. This is even beyond strange. Most of the world, though, in traditional cultures around the world, this talk of demons is nothing out of the ordinary for them. Most people live their lives much more vulnerably than we do our own, and they know what it feels like to be threatened in this way. It's not my world. It's not the one I know. But one thing that we all I think we can identify with in Mark that's very familiar to all of us, is that we all know. We all have in common what the ancients knew, and what we know with them is that life is fragile and that life is vulnerable, and there are realities that are challenge our lives and human flourishing upon the face of the earth. What Mark would describe, what he describes as wilderness, is something that we all understand. Wilderness is where the wild things are, and even though we have built a society and a culture around us, and we have safety and security around us, the wilderness is always encroaching. The wilderness, the wild things are always threatening. And Mark has already told us that in Jesus is cast, he's baptized, but then where does the Holy Spirit send Jesus? But into the wilderness to engage the enemy in battle. The powers which threaten human thriving and fighting demons is just part of the work of Mark. We don't see any of this much. We don't see it described this way in any of the other Gospels, and none of them are interested really interested in telling us about the demons. That's not the point. Jesus is the point. At the end of the story, the demoniac has become a new man. It's all about what Jesus is all about. It's about what Jesus is doing. And the townspeople, they all come out to check out what's going on because they're hearing now there's something going on. The erstwhile demoniac is sitting near Jesus, and he's clothed and in his right mind. And the story is just getting started. The remarkable deed, the crowd, drawing the crowd. And they saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. Mark doesn't withhold the truth about the townspeople, how they responded to Jesus that day, despite what had taken place. They did not flock to him with their burdens and problems. They did not see him as their Savior. They saw him as a threat. They saw the man healed, and it terrified them to the point that they said, Jesus is a problem too. We got to get rid of him. They want to push him out of the neighborhood as well. They're not only afraid of the demoniac, even though he's healed, they're afraid of Jesus. The story doesn't end in gloom and fear. Mark spotlights a disciple there who, unlike the rest, begs to be with Jesus. "Let me come with you," he asks. And who's the disciple now? The demoniac, who had found unexpected grace and new life in the most unlikely of places, among the tombs, where, for all intents and purposes, he is dead. But from time to time, Jesus calls people, it's the story the Gospels tell us. Jesus is calling people to follow him. He's calling for disciples. We heard about the call of Levi last week, but this time, first time is in Simon and Andrew's mother-in-law, that Jesus gets a volunteer. And Jesus says, "No, you can't come with me. You must stay and tell them what has happened. Tell them how the Lord has had mercy on you." And this is the point. It's not the demons. It's the point is as I understand the text, mercy is the point of the story. The man must tell everyone about the mercy that he has received, because even though it was right there in front of them, they can't see it. They're so overcome with their own fear and their own anxiety, they are blind to being able to see Jesus as he is. And they only see the threat in front of them. The whole town comes out, and they saw something there, but they didn't see mercy. That means they didn't really see what Jesus had done. Nicole, well, I heard my grandmother's voice. She was calling me from the kitchen. She had this coconut cake which she made every week. World-class coconut cake. She says, "Morton, stop that." I'm not even in the same room with her, Morton. I don't remember what I was doing, but in part because the list of things I might have been doing were, that I shouldn't have been doing was not a short list, so I don't remember. What I remember was, she knew what I was doing. I didn't quite get how she knew the secret weapon. I said, and she, if she were pressed on what her secret weapon was, she'd say, "Well, I have eyes in the back of my head." So, it's fascinating, isn't it? A teacher knows her students, and she knows them so well. She knows them better than they know themselves, so she knows what they're up to before they know what they're up to. But it's the same thing. No secrets from her. And stop that right now. And I'm not doing anything. But Jesus sees everything too, and was constantly seeing things that everyone else, other people were missing. They were not seeing. This demoniac, this is frightening. There's this power here, intimidating and frightening power, and everybody can see that. So they bind him up, they chain him, they push him out to live among the tombs. He's dead to them, and they are safe. They are secure. That's what they are seeing: their safety, their security. And in a world, where we're constantly under threat, safety and security is no small thing. Jesus sees something else as well. He sees what they do not see. He sees them what they see. He also sees what they see. But he has eyes to see through the fear, through the intimidation. He looks through all that craziness and sees a man in need, a human being just like all of us. And when you can see the other person as a human being and not as a frightening thing, not as a threat, mercy is always possible. But it's really a lot much easier, and that's the problem, isn't it? It's much easier to see everything that's wrong. It's so much easier to see what's wrong. It's so much easier to see that which frightens us, thing in others that frightens us. And that's what we see. So we fail to see the possibility of something else that might be there as well. We fail to see the person who's there. We fail to attend to that person and to recognize that even in this ugliness, there is beauty there. David Ford's a professor of divinity at Cambridge University. He has a book called The Shape of Living. He tells of visiting the L'Arche community. L'Arche is French. Where's Rosemary? We didn't need her. Well, L'Arche means ark, it's Noah's Ark. An international community, it's been around, it's nothing new, it's been around for a long time now. Provides refuge, a place of refuge for special needs adults. And Dr. Ford met a woman there she met Catherine, who was a caregiver at L'Arche, and David asked her where she finds the energy, the patience, even the humility to provide care to this community, the individuals in this community. And she says, every person here, we are waiting for the beauty to appear. She says, it takes years sometimes, and you may have to adjust your eyes to be able to see it, the different kinds of beauty that are there. And just waiting for the beauty to appear. She's speaking Christian, looking for the beauty, the possibility, the potential, the beauty that's there. Because unless you can see that, unless you have eyes to see that, the demons win. Well, my grandmother, she knew me better than I knew myself. She knew when I was getting into mischief. She didn't even need to be in the room. And as a kid, okay, how did she know that? But I was never frightened of her, you know. It wasn't like she had supernatural, magical powers, you know. And she loved me. I loved her. There was such safety and security and mercy and grace there. I knew that love was there. I was never frightened by her. And sometimes, you know, but you know, grandparents, they see the child out in the world. You know, the other people are busy with their own lives. They don't have a whole lot of energy to extend, and it's difficult work to, you know, to really look at people in the way Grandma looks at you. It's much harder. People just don't have that kind of energy to do that with everybody. And so it's easy. We're, you know, out in the world, we know, we have the common experience of never really being seen. And Jesus is able to look through all the brokenness, all the failure, and the feelings of exhaustion even within himself, to push through the inertia and past the ugly in our lives, and to see us as God intended us to be, as creatures bearing the image of God. And it's that which makes mercy possible. We see the humanity, the possibility of humanity, and another mercy follows. Jesus sees the beautiful in God's world and God's children. I spend time with, I'm changing his name because he lives in West Union. But I've spent time with Gene. I drop by his trailer where he lives, and that trailer is his world. And there are healthcare aides and nurses and social workers, Meals on Wheels people who come to his store. That's his world. He's disabled. He's trapped inside a body that's become his prison. He's bedridden 24/7. He suffers chronic pain for which he has subscriptions for morphine and fentanyl. And he has his demons, you can say, and he has a very troubled and turbulent and chaotic relationship with his 40-something-year-old son, a son who is addicted to drugs and is so desperate for his father to see him. He sometimes shows up when he needs a place to stay. He has no place of his own. Sometimes he's there for a few days. Sometimes he's there for a week. Sometimes he's there for a few months, depending on how much Gene can tolerate his son. Or, you know, perhaps the sheriff is getting close on his heels, so he's out the door and on to the next place to be. Gene's conversations are most often rooted in the past. He has music that he grew up with, and he has his memories to talk about, and sometimes his conversations turn into confessions. I hope God forgives me for that, he says, after telling me a story. And it wasn't a pretty story. And I said, Gene, you are forgiven. You are already forgiven. You don't have to ask and plead and beg for God to forgive you. It's already there for you. All you have to do is receive it. And receive it and know that it's true for you. You are forgiven. Now, there's not anything really you can say about his situation that's good, but there are these moments of beauty, and I look through all the ugly that's there, and there's beauty there as well. Paul says our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Now, for us, we live pretty comfortably. Our lives, we don't agonize. We don't see, we don't often see the agonized, demoniac, wrenching chains. But we are well acquainted, aren't we, with the evil of genocides and terrorist attacks and human trafficking and the evil that manifests itself in our own lives, where there's jealousy and anger and vitriol in our relationships, and we see love of power and love of money taking the place of relationships and overpowering relationships, and we want to try to control it, to put chains around it, to suppress it, to keep it out, but we can't keep it all. We can't keep it out. The old hymn rings true, the one that Martin Luther wrote for us. For still our ancient foe does seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate on earth is not his equal. The truth is, I think anyone can see demons. It's easy to see the things that have gone wrong. It's easy to see the bad. And if that's all we see, then the demons win. But looking past all the demons to see the human being, the real person that's there, that's a holy thing to be able to, in that moment. I remember a volunteer washing dishes by hand in the soup kitchen. He did it every week. The preacher asked him, "You must really like these people to be here every week." And the volunteer, he says, Like hasn't got anything to do with it. Do you know these people? And they aren't on the street for no reason. And I'm here, he said, because God has called me. God has put me here. But really, he's being honest in the moment, yes, but he's a grumpy old curmudgeon. But there's always sort of, there's often a hint of a smile underneath his gruff nature that's not too, if you just notice, if you're willing to see, if you'll just notice, there's that little tiny hint of a smile. Yeah, he's among people who are not easy to like. Unlikable, often unlikable, and yet he's there every week. And there's that smile. I think he does love being there. He's learning to see the beauty in places where there is no beauty, the grim lives that these people are living in there at the soup kitchen, seeing them. And I could talk to you about all the ways you were like Jesus in this story. Good at seeing the beauty in others when what's most easily in front of you, the thing that's easiest to see is the ugliness there. You see the beauty in one another. Just being there for families when they need it most. Beauty in your neighbors when, it's easier to take offense. It takes work, but there you are. There are times when we are ourselves like the demoniac. I'm thinking when the world doesn't see us, but rather what's wrong with us. Sees our failures, or looks at us with disappointment, sees the brokenness there that's in our lives, and recoils against it. I think this story here is for us, that we might know the promise of this gospel, that God sees you. Whatever the stuff may be that's cluttering up your life, your world, whatever may be covering up the glimmer of God in you, God sees through all that, sees you. Like the grandmother who knows her grandson, God loves what he sees. Offer this to you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.